When you picture sabotage during World War II, your mind likely conjures up dramatic images of heroic commandos operating behind enemy lines. Men in dark uniforms, planting explosives on a critical railway bridge under the cover of darkness, or a daring spy stealing enemy battle plans. These acts of explosive cinematic sabotage certainly happened, and they played a crucial role in the Allied victory. But the Allies possessed another, far more insidious and perhaps even more powerful weapon in their arsenal. It wasn't a bomb or a gun. It was a book, a small, unassuming field manual created in secret that provided a blueprint for destroying a country, not from the outside with explosives, but from the inside, with something far more corrosive, purposeful stupidity. This is the declassified story of the OSS Simple Sabotage Field Manual, a secret government guide that taught ordinary citizens how to weaponize everyday life and bring the Nazi war machine to a grinding, frustrating halt. The story of the manual begins with the birth of America's first centralized intelligence agency, the Office of Strategic Services, or OSS. Created in 1942, in the desperate early days of World War II, the OSS was the direct precursor to the modern CIA. It was the brainchild of its director, a decorated World War I hero and brilliant lawyer named William Wild Bill Donovan. Donovan's vision was for an agency that could wage a new kind of warfare, a war fought not on the battlefield, but in the shadows, using espionage, propaganda, and unconventional tactics. He recruited a diverse team of soldiers, academics, scientists, and even criminals, all tasked with finding creative new ways to undermine the Axis powers. One of their most important tasks was to find a way to support and weaponize the citizen sympathizers living under Nazi occupation across Europe. These were ordinary people, factory workers, train conductors, office managers, who hated the occupation but lacked the training or equipment for traditional armed resistance. The OSS needed to give them a way to fight back. The solution came in the form of a 32-page booklet, printed in 1944, titled The Simple Sabotage Field Manual. Declassified and released to the public by the CIA in 2008, this document is a masterpiece of psychological warfare. Its central idea was revolutionary. It argued that the most effective sabotage was not the loud, dramatic act that would be immediately noticed and punished. Instead, it was the accumulation of 1,000 tiny, mundane, and seemingly accidental acts of inefficiency. The manual was a guide for ordinary people to become citizen saboteurs, to disrupt and demoralize the enemy through what the manual itself called purposeful stupidity. The goal was to introduce sand into the gears of the enemy's industrial and bureaucratic machine, not with a single powerful blow, but with a slow, corrosive, and maddening grind that would destroy productivity, lower morale, and create an atmosphere of chaos and frustration. The manual is divided into sections, providing a chillingly detailed blueprint for how to attack every facet of an enemy state. The first and perhaps most ingenious section focuses not on physical destruction, but on the sabotage of organizations and decision-making processes. It's a guide on how to turn any meeting, conference, or administrative procedure into a black hole of inefficiency. The instructions are both specific and universally recognizable. For anyone involved in a committee or conference, the manual advises, talk as frequently as possible and at great length, bring up irrelevant issues, haggle over the precise wordings of communications, minutes, and resolutions. Refer matters back to committees for further study and consideration. Be worried about the propriety of any decision. Raise the question of whether the action is within the jurisdiction of the group or whether it might conflict with the policy of some higher echelon. It's a recipe for absolute paralysis, turning any attempt at productive decision-making into an endless, frustrating loop of pointless debate and bureaucratic maneuvering. Imagine dozens of citizen saboteurs employing these tactics in every town hall, every corporate boardroom, and every government office in an occupied territory. The cumulative effect would be a complete shutdown of the enemy's ability to govern and organize. The manual then moves up the chain of command, providing a set of instructions for managers and supervisors who were sympathetic to the Allied cause. This section provides a masterclass in how to destroy an organization from the top down. The manual instructs these saboteur managers to misunderstand orders, Ask endless questions or engage in long correspondences about such orders. Do not order new working materials until your current stocks have been virtually exhausted, so that the slightest delay in filling your order will mean a shutdown. Order high-quality materials which are hard to get. In making work assignments, always give out the unimportant jobs first. Promote inefficient workers. Give them undeserved promotions. Hold conferences when there is more critical work to be done. Multiply the procedures and clearances involved in issuing instructions, paying checks, and so on. See that 3 people have to approve everything where one would do. This wasn't just about being a bad manager. It was about strategically cultivating incompetence. It was a guide to creating a top-down cascade of chaos, where the most useless employees were rewarded and the most critical tasks were endlessly delayed, ensuring that the entire organization would slowly rot from the head down. The genius of these instructions was their deniability. Anyone accused of sabotage could simply claim they were being overly cautious, or that they were just following procedure, or that they had simply misunderstood. It was the perfect, untraceable crime, committed in plain sight. The manual's brilliance was in turning every level of an organization's hierarchy into a potential weapon, but its most powerful and destructive sections were aimed not at the boardroom, but at the everyday worker on the factory floor, providing a detailed blueprint for how a single disgruntled employee could bring a war machine to its knees, one misplaced tool and one accidental mistake at a time. The OSS manual's strategy for paralyzing an enemy nation from the top down, by turning its own bureaucracy against itself, was a stroke of psychological genius. But the true power of its doctrine, the real heart of its destructive potential, lay in its instructions for the largest and most critical segment of any wartime society, the ordinary worker. While managers could create bottlenecks and committees could stall decisions, it was the men and women on the factory floors, in the railway yards, and in the telephone exchanges who truly kept the enemy's war machine running. The manual provided this civilian army with a comprehensive guide on how to become the most inefficient, frustrating, and destructive employee imaginable, all while maintaining an almost perfect shield of plausible deniability. It was a blueprint for weaponizing the individual, turning a single disgruntled laborer into a secret agent of chaos. The core of this strategy was the art of purposeful stupidity. It was a series of simple, maddening behaviors designed to slow down production, ruin materials, and destroy morale from the bottom up. The manual begins by focusing on the saboteur's general attitude. It advises workers to be as irritable and quarrelsome as possible, without ever crossing the line into open insubordination. The goal was to create a constantly negative and demoralizing atmosphere. By complaining about the working conditions, arguing with colleagues over trivial matters, and displaying a generally sullen and uncooperative attitude, a single worker could poison the morale of an entire team, making everyone less efficient and more prone to errors. But the manual's instructions for actual work performance were even more specific and insidious. Work slowly, it directs. Think of ways to increase the number of movements necessary on your job. Contrive as many interruptions to your work as you can. When you go to the lavatory, spend a longer time there than is necessary. Arrange your tools inefficiently so that you have to make extra motions to get them. This doctrine of inefficiency extended to the very act of following orders. The citizen saboteur was taught to be a master of malicious compliance and feigned incompetence. The manual states, pretend to misunderstand instructions. Ask for them to be repeated several times. If you are supposed to write something down, write it so badly that it is difficult to read. Do your work imperfectly and blame it on bad tools, machinery, or equipment. Never pass on your skill and experience to a new or less skilled worker. Make them learn everything the hard way. Each of these acts in isolation is a minor annoyance. But imagine this happening thousands of times a day across an entire nation's industrial base. A machine part is made just slightly out of tolerance. A crucial order is written down with the wrong part number. A veteran machinist forgets to show a new apprentice the correct way to calibrate a lathe. The cumulative effect is a cascade of failures. Production quotas are missed, finished products fail quality control, and the entire system becomes bogged down in a mire of mistakes and rework. The genius of this strategy was its almost perfect deniability. A worker who is caught performing an act of explosive sabotage would be executed, but a worker who claims they simply misunderstood an order, or that their tool was blunt, or that they were just having a clumsy day, they might be reprimanded or fired, but it was incredibly difficult to prove their actions were a deliberate act of sabotage. This provided a relatively low-risk, high-reward method of resistance for the average person. The manual effectively gave them permission and instructions on how to be the worst possible version of themselves for a patriotic cause. But the OSS knew that some citizen sympathizers would be willing to take greater risks. And so, the manual transitions from the psychological realm of purposeful stupidity into the more direct and destructive world of simple, physical sabotage. This section of the manual is a chillingly practical guide to causing maximum damage with minimum risk of detection. For workers in factories and machine shops, the instructions were simple but devastating. Let cutting tools grow dull. They will ruin the work and may even break the machine. Jam bits of metal, nuts, bolts, or even just a handful of sand or dirt into the moving parts of a machine. Forget to lubricate parts that need it. These small acts of neglect and interference could destroy expensive and hard-to-replace industrial equipment, causing production shutdowns that could last for days or even weeks. For those working in transportation, the manual provided a menu of disruptive actions. For truck drivers, it suggested, let the air out of the tires, put sugar in the fuel tank which will clog the engine. Accidentally forget to fill the engine with oil, causing it to seize up. For railway workers, the acts were even more consequential. Put sand in the axle boxes of railway cars. Jam the railway signals to cause delays and confusion. On a steam locomotive, leave the water running out of the boiler, leading to a massive and destructive explosion. The manual's scope reached into every corner of the enemy's infrastructure. For electrical workers, it suggested damaging insulation on wires to cause short circuits, or subtly misaligning contacts on switches so they would overheat and start a fire. It even provided instructions on how to start small, easily explainable fires in wastebaskets or closets, creating disruptions and panic. The cumulative effect of these thousands of small physical acts would be a nation slowly grinding to a halt. It would be a death by 1,000 paper cuts. Equipment would constantly break down, trains would be inexplicably delayed, and the entire war machine from the factory floor to the front lines would slow to a crawl, all without a single bomb being dropped by an Allied plane. The factory floor and the office were just the beginning. The OSS manual envisioned a society where every aspect of daily life could be turned into an act of resistance. The next chapter of this secret guide would teach citizens how to sabotage public transportation, communications, and even the morale of the enemy soldiers themselves, turning an entire country into a frustrating and inhospitable trap. The strategy of the OSS Simple Sabotage Field Manual was total. It recognized that a modern industrial war machine was not just a collection of factories and railways, it was a complex organism that relied on a functioning civil society to support it. Therefore, to truly cripple the enemy, the sabotage had to extend beyond the workplace. The war had to be brought into every office building, every public square, and every home in the occupied territory. The manual's next chapters provided a chillingly comprehensive blueprint for doing just that. It was a guide for turning the very fabric of society into a weapon, transforming everyday life for the occupying forces into a frustrating, demoralizing, and inescapable nightmare. The next major battleground in this secret war was the enemy's nervous system, its lines of communication. The manual provided a variety of simple but highly effective techniques for disrupting telephone services. For the ordinary citizen, the instructions were beautifully simple. The manual states, at a public telephone, leave the receiver off the hook. If you go to a hotel or office building and the operator is not on duty, go into as many empty offices as you can and leave the receivers off the hook. This simple act, if multiplied by hundreds or thousands of people across a city, could overload the electromechanical switching systems of the 1940s, causing entire exchanges to shut down and paralyzing both civilian and military communication. For those with slightly more access, like a telephone operator, the instructions were more direct. Give wrong numbers. pretend that the connection is bad and cut people off, mix up long-distance calls. For linemen or workers, it suggested, in a storm when repair work is being done, see that you can cut a few extra wires by mistake. The insulation on wires can be damaged in an inconspicuous way so that they will short-circuit during the next rainy day. Each act was small, deniable, and devastatingly effective, but the manual's most insidious instructions for communication sabotage required no technical skill at all. It focused on the most powerful and uncontrollable medium of all, word of mouth. An entire section of the manual is dedicated to the art of spreading disturbing rumors. This was pure psychological warfare, designed to be waged by civilians. The instructions were to start rumors that sound like they come from a good source. The manual provided specific examples of the types of rumors to spread. To create economic panic, saboteurs were told to whisper to their friends and neighbors, "Tell them you heard that gasoline rations are about to be drastically cut, or that the local currency is about to be devalued and declared worthless." This would trigger hoarding, bank runs, and a loss of faith in the occupation government. To destroy faith in the leadership, they were to tell stories of incompetence among enemy leaders, or of corruption and lavish parties being held by officials while the general population suffered. The most vicious rumors were designed to create fear and social distrust. The manual suggests, tell stories of defeats on the front lines, even if they are not true. Spread stories about tainted or poisoned food being sold in local shops run by collaborators. Whisper that the secret police are about to conduct a wave of mass arrests. The effect of this constant stream of disinformation would be to create a society steeped in fear, anxiety, and paranoia. No one could be trusted. Nothing the government said could be believed. This constant low-level psychological stress was designed to wear down the population's will to cooperate with the occupiers and to create a chaotic environment that was difficult to govern. It was a way to turn a nation's own social networks into a weapon against itself. The manual then moves on to disrupting public life and transportation, focusing on creating daily, maddening friction for the enemy. For railway systems, it went beyond the physical sabotage of the tracks. It provided instructions for those working in the stations. A ticket seller was instructed to give out the wrong tickets with the wrong destinations, give the wrong change. Pretend you don't understand what the person is asking for. Create long, slow-moving lines. For passengers, the instructions were equally simple and disruptive. Accidentally lose your luggage on the platform to block foot traffic. Jam the coin slots on ticket machines or vending machines with old coins or bits of metal. The goal was to make the simple act of traveling by train a miserable and time-consuming ordeal, delaying the movement of both soldiers and workers. This philosophy of social friction extended even to the enemy's leisure time. The OSS recognized that morale was a critical component of any army, and the manual provided clever ways to attack it. It has a section on disrupting movie theaters, one of the few places an occupying soldier could go to relax. The manual suggests, during a film, especially one with pro-enemy propaganda, you can cough and sneeze loudly and persistently. You can open a small bag of moths or other harmless insects, which will fly around the projector beam and disrupt the picture. As you leave the theater, you can use a small knife or razor blade to make a long slash in the seat cushions. These were acts of petty vandalism, but their strategic purpose was profound. They were designed to send a message: there is no escape. There is no place you can go to relax where you are not surrounded by a hostile, resentful population that will take every opportunity to make your life miserable. This constant low-level harassment was designed to wear down the discipline and morale of the individual soldier, making them more prone to making mistakes and reacting with brutal, counterproductive crackdowns that would only alienate the population further. The manual had turned the factory, the office, the phone lines, and now even the movie theater into a battlefield. The entire country was becoming a frustrating and inhospitable trap. The war was everywhere, in every daily interaction. When the war ended, the OSS was disbanded and its secret manual was locked away in classified archives for over 60 years. But the ideas within it, the principles of weaponized inefficiency and psychological disruption, did not disappear. And when the manual was finally declassified in the 21st century, people began to notice something deeply unsettling. The manual's guide to destroying a country from the inside looked eerily and terrifyingly familiar. The Second World War ended in 1945. Shortly after, the Office of Strategic Services was disbanded, and its operational successor, the Central Intelligence Agency, was born. The secret documents of the OSS, including the simple Sabotage field manual, were classified and locked away in government archives, seemingly destined to become a forgotten footnote in the history of espionage. For over 60 years, the manual remained a secret. Then, in 2008, the CIA officially declassified the document and released it to the public. Initially, it was treated as a historical curiosity, a fascinating and sometimes comical relic from a bygone era. Historians and enthusiasts pored over its pages, marveling at the ingenuity and sheer audacity of the OSS's vision for a citizen-led war fought with paperclips and bad attitudes. But as the manual began to circulate more widely on the internet, something strange and unsettling began to happen. People in ordinary modern-day professions, office workers, government employees, middle managers, began to read it not with historical detachment, but with a growing, chilling sense of recognition. The manual's detailed instructions for how to paralyze an enemy organization didn't read like a historical artifact from the 1940s. They read like a perfect, brutally accurate description of their daily work lives. The section on sabotaging meetings, with its advice to talk as frequently as possible and at great length, bring up irrelevant issues, and haggle over the precise wordings of communications, was no longer a clever tactic to be used against the Nazis. It was a perfect summary of every pointless, soul-crushing corporate conference call. The instruction to refer matters to committees for further study and consideration was now the standard operating procedure in countless modern bureaucracies. People began to share the document with a dark, cynical humor. The OSS hadn't just written a guide to sabotage, they had written the unspoken employee handbook for nearly every dysfunctional organization in the 21st century. The parallels were too specific and too numerous to ignore. The manual's instructions for saboteur managers read like a checklist for the world's worst boss. Promote inefficient workers, multiply procedures and clearances, and hold conferences when there is more critical work to be done, were no longer just clever ways to undermine an enemy war factory. They were now common complaints in workplaces around the globe. It led to an uncomfortable question that people began to ask, half-jokingly: is my boss incompetent, or are they a saboteur? The section on the individual worker was perhaps even more resonant. The manual's advice to work slowly, contrive as many interruptions as you can, and pretend to misunderstand instructions sounded eerily similar to the modern phenomenon of quiet quitting and widespread employee disengagement. While the original citizen saboteur was motivated by patriotism, the modern worker exhibiting the same behaviors might be motivated by burnout, low pay, or a toxic work culture. This shock of recognition raises a profound and deeply unsettling question. Is this all just a massive coincidence? Is it simply a universal, unavoidable feature of any large human organization, whether it's a government agency or a multinational corporation, to naturally devolve into the very state of inefficiency and paralysis that the OSS sought to engineer? Or is something more deliberate at play? Are the timeless principles of simple sabotage still being actively and secretly used, not just as a historical curiosity, but as a modern weapon? When you look at the world through the cynical lens of the OSS manual, you begin to see its principles everywhere. In the realm of corporate espionage, a rival company wouldn't need to steal trade secrets if they could simply infiltrate their competitor with a few key employees trained to follow the manual's instructions. By promoting the wrong people, creating bureaucratic bottlenecks, and fostering a negative work environment, they could destroy their competitors' productivity and innovation from the inside, all without breaking a single law. In the political arena, the implications are even more chilling. A foreign state actor seeking to weaken a rival nation wouldn't need to launch a military or cyber attack. They could simply train human agents in the art of bureaucratic warfare and place them within their rival government agencies. These agents could paralyze decision-making, delay critical infrastructure projects, and sow chaos, all while claiming to be dedicated if somewhat incompetent public servants. It's a form of warfare that is almost impossible to detect or prove, a slow-acting poison that attacks the very ability of a nation to function. The manual's section on spreading disturbing rumors has become even more potent in the age of social media. State-sponsored disinformation campaigns designed to create panic, erode trust in institutions, and polarize the public are a direct, high-tech evolution of the same psychological warfare techniques the OSS pioneered in 1944. The tools have changed from whispers in a marketplace to viral posts on the internet. But the goal, to disrupt and demoralize a society, remains exactly the same. The simple Sabotage field manual, therefore, is far more than just a historical curiosity from World War II. It is a timeless, deeply cynical, and frighteningly accurate analysis of the hidden vulnerabilities of any human organization. It serves as a dark mirror, reflecting the frustrating absurdities of our own modern lives, forcing us to question whether the inefficiencies we face every day are accidental or by design. The document reveals that the greatest threat to a country, a company, or any collective endeavor isn't always a powerful external enemy with bombs and armies. Sometimes the most dangerous threat is an internal decay of morale, a breakdown of common sense, and a workforce that has lost its purpose. It's a reminder that the tools for destroying a nation are not always found in an arsenal. Sometimes they're found in the conference room, in the employee handbook, and in the quiet, maddening inefficiencies that we have come to accept as a normal part of our everyday lives. The next time you find yourself stuck in a pointless meeting, bogged down by bureaucratic red tape, you might ask yourself, is this just another frustrating day at the office, or is it sabotage?